Hello. In the Group A of Grand Prix in Berlin in the round 1, Andrey Esipenko and Alexander Grischuk were playing, and we had a very interesting opening. We had a very interesting opening choice by Esipenko. It was the Catalan opening, but somewhat different, not quite in the spirit of the opening, and after castling he went for b3, defending this pawn, which is not something that Catalan players usually do. They usually sacrifice a pawn and then play for some initiative pressure along the long diagonal and try to prove their compensation. But Esipenko chose a different approach, which allowed Grischuk to fix a weakness on c4, although there is some pressure along the long diagonal, so that kind of compensates for the weakness on c4. Esipenko finishes development by castling and now cd4. And now you see that white has slight issues with his structure, so Esipenko takes on d4 and now a6. The reasoning behind a6 is to stop knight b5, knight b6, because black wants to go queen c7 at some point. Knight b5 would be quite annoying, so he prepares this with a6. And now Esipenko tries to exchange bishops by bishop a3. After this move, Grischuk thought for 50 minutes. He decided to capture on a3. What else could he play? Also, a move like knight bd7 was possible, and to play queen c7 next, organize some blockade on c5. Maybe Grischuk was trying to just free his queen and not babysit the bishop on e7, so he can continue with his plan. After almost 50 minutes of thinking, he took on a3, knight a3, and now queen c7. Queen c1, he's trying to escape the pin on the d file by rook d8. Now Grischuk plays bishop d7, tries to get his bishop out, let's say to a4, to somehow harass the rook, which can come to d1, and then to get the knight out. Also, it was possible to go for e5 immediately, with bishop e6, let's say knight b3, bishop e6, and then continue with knight bd7, rook b8, b6, and try to form some blockade on the c4 pawn. But he went for bishop d7, and now Esipenko plays rook d1. Also, a move like c5 was interesting, trying to put some pressure on the b7 pawn by playing rook b1 next, making the b6 square much weaker. But Esipenko tried rook d1 in this position, and now bishop a4, like I said. And now knight bd7. Rook b1 by white, trying to put pressure on b7, and that's why Grischuk plays knight c5. And now Esipenko tries to exchange knights by knight b3, tries to fix the structure also, to connect his pawns on the queen side, and Grischuk doesn't do it immediately, and he goes rook a d8. They exchange, and now queen e3, putting some additional pressure on the c5 knight. And in this position it was possible maybe to go for knight f d7 to defend this knight and to still keep the blockade alive, this blockade on c5. But Grischuk, for whatever reason, took on b3, ab, and now bishop c6. Maybe the idea behind this was to just close the b file and claim that you have the open d file for yourself, and you don't have a reason to complain as black. So Esipenko tries for b4, and Grischuk makes some space for his king, bishop c6. It will turn out that this move is quite weakening, and I don't see a reason for this move except limiting the knight from f6 to not go to e4, but it's weakening the king a bit, especially the e3 square, which is now quite exposed. Now b5 was played by Grischuk, trying to make some squares for his knight, especially d5, by eliminating the pawn on c4, and now they exchanged, but now the knight can become really active on d5, and the knight on a3 is, on the other hand, very, very neglected. But the only good thing about it is that it's attacking the b5 pawn. Now Esipenko plays queen c5, but Grischuk avoids the exchange, of course, because in case of exchange he would lose the b pawn. He avoids it by queen a6, and now rook a1. He defends the knight on a3. For example, if he took on b5, there is rook d5. and the knight is double attacked. So the only way to prolong the game is to play knight c7, but after queen a2, the queen is under attack, the e2 pawn is under attack, so white has to defend his rook by queen c1, but after rook d7, there is a threat of rook c7, and that's why white has to go back, but after losing the e2 pawn, white's position should collapse, because then f3 pawn is loose and the king's protection is non-existent. Rook a1 was the better choice, and black plays rook c8. Doesn't even defend the pawn on b5, but Esipenko plays queen d4, preparing knight c4 next, which was not the best choice. The better choice was to capture the pawn. And after queen d6, let's say, to go to d3. And still, black is slightly better because of this weakening f3 move, but I don't see a big problem. The material is reduced, and I think that white can organize a good defense in this case. But he tried for this, and he was going for knight c4 next, but Grischuk anticipates this by queen a4, because now after this there is queen b4, and white is just losing the piece. Now he is forced to be a bit passive by queen b2, knight d5, and now it was a very important moment in the game in which Esipenko played queen b1, but actually it was better to go king h1 to step away from any checks on a7, and now in case of knight b4 there is rook b1, winning back the pawn on b5. If queen b4, the same goes with take and knight b5, and the position is equal. But still, white is very passive and it would be tough to navigate such position, but it's still much better than what happened in the game. In the game, queen b1 happened, and Grischuk missed a good chance here. He played knight b4, when he should play queen a7 check, and after king h1 to go queen e3, using this weak pawn, and let's say in case of knight b5 to capture on e2, and if this, queen d2, with rook c2 next. The b4 pawn is going to hang, white's king is much more exposed than black's king, and that's something that decides the game. After this, Grischuk took on b4, king g2 was played, and still black's position is much better here because he's a pawn up and white's pieces are paralyzed. So in case of some rook b8, black would have a pretty easy game. Let's say after knight c4 there is queen c2, and in case of this you take on e2 and take on c4 next. So it's not so easy for white to move here. Rook b8 was the better choice. But he plays g6, which is a bit dubious. It weakens the squares around the king. This construction was much more safe for black's king, and with g6, he's making some holes in the position, especially f6, as you will see later on. And now Esipenko plays queen b2. He exploits this fact that f6 is now very weak, and now Grischuk plays knight c2, which forces a draw. Again, it's better to go rook b8 here to support the b5 pawn and to somehow escape with knight d5 and to try to push this b pawn. But after knight c2, Esipenko took, which was more or less forced. Now rook c2, because if queen c2 there is queen b5 and the material is equal, so it's nothing more than equality. He took with the rook, but there is a nice resource here, queen f6, and it's forcing the draw on spot. Grischuk took on e2, and now king h3. It's important not to go to the first rank because, let's say king f1, there is rook a2, and if this, rook c2, and in case of rook d1 there is rook c1. But once you exchange the rooks, it's all over, so king has to go to h3 not to allow any rook exchanges. Grischuk had to go rook a2 because what else to do? Rook c1, rook c2. Also, I want to mention that queen a8 here is not possible because of rook d1, having rook d8 next. Yeah, Grischuk has to repeat moves by rook c2, but also rook a1, rook a2, and after a couple of more repetitions, they agreed to a draw. There was no way to avoid the draw. And after the round 1, all players in the group A have half a point. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section. I will answer to you. Have a nice day. See you soon and bye.